stop what you're doing for 1 second. Right now, before you scroll past this, I need you to notice something. There is a conversation happening inside your mind. Right now, while you're watching this. And it isn't kind. Maybe it sounds like, "You've already wasted too much time." Or, "Other people have it figured out. Why don't you?" Or, "The one that never seems to leave." You're just not built for the life you want. You've heard it. Maybe this morning in the mirror. Maybe last night lying in the dark, replaying something you said 3 years ago that no one else even remembers. Maybe it's been your constant background noise for so long that you've stopped questioning it. You've mistaken the noise for the truth. But here is what I need to tell you. And I need you to stay with me, because this is going to go somewhere you don't expect. 2,000 years ago, there was a man who sat alone in a military tent at the edge of a dying empire, surrounded by plague and war and betrayal, and he wrote himself a letter. Not a letter to be published, not a letter to be admired, a letter to survive. That man was Marcus Aurelius, emperor, soldier, philosopher, and what he wrote in that tent is now considered one of the most extraordinary documents in human history. Not because of what he conquered, because of what he refused to let conquer him, his own mind. This is not a feel-good video. I'm not going to tell you to manifest your dreams or repeat affirmations in the mirror until you believe them. This is a blueprint, a 2,000-year-old blueprint, confirmed by modern neuroscience, for taking back control of the most powerful and most dangerous thing you will ever own. Your own thinking. Stay with me. Because what I'm about to show you changes everything. Here's what most people get catastrophically wrong about Stoicism. They think it's the philosophy of people who gave up feeling. Cold, robotic, emotionally detached. They picture toga-wearing scholars with nothing to lose, building theories from the safety of libraries, untouched by the chaos of real life. That is exactly backwards. Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome in 161 AD, and the moment he sat down on that throne, the world tried to destroy him. Within months, Rome's eastern border was being torn apart by the Parthian Empire, one of the most feared military forces in the ancient world. Generals panicked. Soldiers fell. The entire eastern frontier hung by a thread. Marcus organized. He dispatched his armies. He held the line. Then, just as that war began to stabilize, Rome was hit by something far worse than any army. Troops returning from the eastern campaigns brought back a plague that medical historians believe was either measles or smallpox. And it didn't stop at the border. It moved through cities, through markets, through families. Historians estimate it killed between 5 and 10 million people. Entire villages went silent. The Roman army lost a third of its soldiers not to battle, but to fever. While Marcus was managing this catastrophe, the Tiber River flooded. Rome's grain supply, the food that fed millions, was destroyed. Famine followed disease. And then, a man Marcus had trusted as a co-ruler, a general named Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor and launched a civil war from within. Think about what that means. The person he trusted most, with armies at his back, stabbed him in the face. This is the man we're taking philosophy from, not someone who theorized about hardship from a garden. Someone who lived inside it every single day, and deliberately chose, to refuse to collapse. And every night, in whatever tent or outpost or palace he happened to be in, he wrote. Not reports, not orders. He wrote to himself. He examined his mind. He challenged his thoughts. He dragged his fears into daylight and looked at them clearly. What we now call the Meditations, one of the best-selling books in history, 2,000 years after it was written, was never meant for anyone else's eyes. It was a man at war with his own mind, using the only weapon he had, deliberate thought. And that weapon, that exact weapon, is available to you. Right now. Today. Let me show you how it works. Before we talk about the solution, you need to understand the enemy. Not the world, not other people, not your circumstances, your brain. Specifically, the part of your brain that has been trying to keep you alive since before humans had language. Modern neuroscience has a name for it, the negativity bias. Here's the operating principle. Your brain is not designed to make you happy. It is designed to keep you alive. And for millions of years, those two things required completely different strategies. If your ancient ancestor heard something moving in the tall grass, something that might be a predator, the brain that assumed danger and ran survived. The brain that stayed calm and waited to see what happened became dinner. So evolution built a brain that defaults to threat, a brain that is always scanning, always cataloging danger, always amplifying the bad over the good, the criticism over the praise, the fear over the possibility. Psychologists have measured this. Negative experiences are processed more deeply and stored more powerfully than positive ones. A single cruel comment can override 50 genuine compliments. One failure can overshadow 100 quiet victories. Your brain is running ancient survival software in a modern world. And the problem is, the threats have changed, but the software hasn't. You don't live on a savanna. There is no predator in the tall grass, but your threat detection system doesn't know that. So instead of lions, it fires at rejection emails, at social media comparisons, at presentations you have to give next Tuesday, at the imaginary conversation where everything goes wrong, at the version of yourself you think you should have been by now. You are running emergency survival protocols, the kind designed for life or death moments, on situations that are not going to kill you, and the result is a mind that feels permanently besieged, anxiety that arrives without a reason, overthinking that never lands anywhere useful, the 2 a.m. spiral where you're replaying something you said at a party 6 months ago that literally no one else remembers. Marcus Aurelius did not have the vocabulary of modern neuroscience. He didn't know about amygdala hijacks or cortisol responses, but he understood, with startling precision, that the human mind was in a constant war with itself. He wrote in the Meditations, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action." He wasn't describing passive thinking. He was describing a training regimen. And the first exercise, understanding what you're actually fighting. There is one idea at the center of Stoic philosophy. One idea Marcus Aurelius returned to more than any other, that if you truly internalize it, will change the texture of your daily experience. It is called the dichotomy of control, and it is far simpler and far harder than it sounds. Here is the idea. Everything in your life falls into one of two categories: things you control, things you don't. That's it. The whole framework in one sentence. What falls inside your control? Your thinking, your effort, your response to events, the standards you hold yourself to, the way you treat the person standing in front of you right now. What falls outside your control? Everything else. What other people think of you? Outside your control. The economy, the algorithm, the market. Outside your control. Whether you get sick. Outside your control. What happened last year, last month, last Tuesday? Outside your control. The traffic, the weather, the opinion of someone who doesn't even know you. All of it outside your control. Now here's what I want you to notice. Think about the negative thoughts that have been living in your mind lately. The ones that wake you up at 3 a.m. The ones that show up uninvited while you're trying to enjoy something good. Be honest with yourself about what they're actually about. Are they about your effort today? The one thing you can actually change? Or are they about outcomes, opinions, and events that are completely beyond your reach? I'll tell you what I've found. For most people, almost every chronic negative thought lives in the second column, the column they cannot control. They lie awake worrying about whether someone thinks they're competent. They can't control that. They spiral about whether their business will succeed. They can't control that outcome. Only the work. They torture themselves over a version of the past that is finished, sealed, and gone forever. They cannot control that either. And here is what this constant worry over uncontrollable things actually costs you. It costs you the present moment. It costs you the only place where anything real can actually happen. Marcus Aurelius, a man managing actual military crises, understood this with a kind of clarity that only comes from being tested at the absolute limit. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Not a suggestion, a discipline. Because the moment you drag your full attention back from the things you cannot control, back from imaginary futures and unchangeable pasts, and drop it into the only moment that exists, which is this one, something shifts. You stop being a hostage. You start being a person who can actually do something. That is what the dichotomy of control actually gives you. Not passivity, not indifference. A laser. All the energy that was scattered across 100 uncontrollable worries. Redirected with terrifying focus onto the one thing that actually matters. What will you do right now with what you have? There is a practice Marcus Aurelius used, one that modern cognitive behavioral therapists have independently rediscovered and confirmed. That is probably the most practical tool in this entire script. He called it, in his own terms, looking at things plainly. We might call it radical reframing. Here's the problem it solves. Most of our suffering is not caused by events. Read that again, because it sounds like a platitude and it absolutely isn't. Most of our suffering is caused by the story we attach to events. The event itself is neutral. It happens. It's done. It's just a moment in time, like any other. What causes the suffering is the meaning we decide, usually unconsciously, usually instantly, to assign it. You didn't get the promotion. That's the event. 15 seconds later, your mind has already written a story. This means I'm not good enough. This means I'll never advance. This means the last 3 years were wasted. This means I made the wrong choices. The event is one thing, the story is the blade. Marcus Aurelius understood this viscerally, and his solution was surgical. He trained himself to strip events down to their bare, literal, unadorned reality. He described a lavish imperial banquet, the kind that symbolized power and prestige, as simply dead animals and old wine. He looked at wealth, the gold and silk and jewels of empire, and described them as colored rocks and dried plant fibers. He looked at fame, the thing Roman culture valued almost above all else, and asked, "What is it, actually?" The sound of strangers saying your name, air moving between lips, something that disappears the moment the mouths close. He wasn't being nihilistic. He was being accurate. He was removing the inflated story from things so that those things could no longer enslave him. Now bring this same practice to your negative thoughts. Someone criticizes your work. What is that, stripped to its bare reality? One person's assessment, formed through the lens of their own insecurities, their own bad day, their own incomplete information, a temporary opinion in a temporary mind. You experience rejection, stripped down. What is it? One path didn't open, not evidence of your worth, not a verdict on your future. One door, closed, in a building with 100 other doors. The future terrifies you, stripped down. What is the future? It doesn't exist yet. It is an image your mind is manufacturing, a simulation made of fear. It has never happened and may never happen exactly the way your brain is insisting it will. This is not emotional suppression. You are not pretending the events don't matter. You are refusing to let your brain's automatic story-making machine run your life. You are choosing to see clearly instead of through the distortion of the first panicked narrative your brain produces. Marcus Aurelius was born into privilege and then trained by life to see through it. He sat at the center of human power and watched clearly how fragile and temporary it all was. That clarity wasn't depression, it was freedom. The moment you stop inflating events, they stop inflating your fear. And when fear shrinks, actual life fits back in. Now I'm going to tell you about the most counterintuitive practice in all of Stoic philosophy. The one that sounds darkest at first. The one that, when you actually understand what it's doing, becomes the most liberating thought your mind can hold. Marcus Aurelius thought about death every single day, not as depression, not as morbidity, as a practice. The Stoics called it memento mori. Remember that you will die. Marcus wrote to himself, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." That sounds extreme. Stay with me. Here's what this practice actually does to negative thinking. The anxieties that consume most of us feel enormous in the moment. Someone didn't like your post. You embarrassed yourself in a meeting. You're behind on a goal you set in January. You're scared of what someone thinks of you. You're carrying guilt about a choice you made 5 years ago. Now, imagine yourself at the very end of your life, every day spent, every choice made. Looking back at everything from the very last point, will any of those anxieties be visible from there? Not as rhetoric, as an actual question. Will the embarrassing meeting matter? Will the person who didn't like your post matter? Will the goal you didn't hit in the right month matter? Almost never. And here's what that reveals. If these things won't matter at the end, they are borrowing significance they don't actually own. Your brain is lending enormous emotional weight to things that do not deserve it, and in doing so, stealing hours, days, months of your actual life. The Stoics didn't meditate on death to feel hopeless. They did it to feel the opposite. Because when you truly hold the fact of your own mortality, really hold it not as an abstract concept but as a lived reality, the question that follows is urgent and clarifying. If my time is limited, what am I doing, spending it inside a mental prison I built myself? This is the question that cuts through everything. Not the anxiety about what people think. Not the spiral about what might go wrong. Not the guilt about what's already done. What am I doing with the time I actually have? Marcus Aurelius faced this question every day. Not theoretically, but as a man who lived in the middle of a plague, who watched millions of people die, who had no guarantee of his own tomorrow. And that awareness didn't make him passive. It made him urgent. It made every choice feel real. Every moment of integrity feel worth protecting. Every hour of anxiety about things outside his control feel like an insult to the finite time he'd been given. Think about the thing that has been consuming your mental energy lately. The grudge, the fear, the comparison, the regret. Ask yourself, and answer honestly, is this how you want to spend a day of your life? Because it is a day of your life. This is what Memento Mori actually teaches. Not despair, not nihilism, urgency, clarity, the refusal to waste what you cannot replace. Here is where philosophy either becomes a life or a nice idea you forget by tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius didn't just believe these things. He built them into the structure of every single day. He was disciplined about the mind the way a general is disciplined about training an army. He knew that the mind, left to its own devices, defaults to its oldest and laziest patterns. The negativity bias, the catastrophizing, the helpless spiral. So he didn't leave it to chance. He built 3 practices: morning, midday, and night. Let me walk you through each one. The morning preparation. Before Marcus Aurelius began each day, before he faced the generals and the senators and the endless crises of running the known world, he prepared his mind. He would sit quietly and think forward. He didn't imagine everything going perfectly. That's not preparation, that's fantasy. He imagined difficulty. He would think, today I will encounter people who are frustrating. Today something will not go as planned. Today I will be tested in some way I cannot fully predict. This sounds like pessimism. It isn't. It's the opposite. When you walk into a day expecting everything to be smooth, the first obstacle hits you like an ambush. You weren't ready. You react from emotion. The day gets away from you before you've had time to think. But when you've already mentally rehearsed the friction, the difficult conversation, the thing that goes sideways, you don't get ambushed. You respond instead of reacting. There's a crucial difference between those 2 words. Reaction is automatic. It's the old brain firing. It's saying something you regret, making a decision in anger, letting someone else's chaos become your chaos. Response is deliberate. It's the mind you've been building. It's the moment between stimulus and choice. And that moment is where your character lives. Try this tomorrow, before you look at your phone, before the noise of the day begins. Sit for 2 minutes. Think, what is likely to challenge me today? Who might frustrate me? What might not work? And then ask, how do I want to handle it when it comes? You're writing the script of your best self before the performance begins. The midday reset. Marcus was often at war, literally. He didn't have long stretches of free time for philosophical reflection. So he developed what we might now call a micro-intervention. A 30-second recalibration available in any moment. Whenever he noticed his mind beginning to drift toward anxiety, toward reactive thinking, toward the pull of things outside his control, he would stop. Ask 3 questions. Is this thought true? Is this thought helpful? Is this thought within my control? These 3 questions, applied honestly, collapse most negative thinking on contact. Because most anxious thoughts are not true. They're projections. Worst-case scenarios your brain has manufactured and labeled as predictions. Most negative spirals are not helpful. They don't produce a solution, just more suffering. And most of the things we torture ourselves with are not within our control. They're other people's choices, past events, and future possibilities that exist only in imagination. When you hold a thought up to those three questions and it fails all three, and it usually does, it becomes very hard to take it seriously. You don't suppress the thought, you don't fight it, you examine it. And in the examining, most of the time it dissolves. Marcus wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." That is not a passive observation. That is a daily operational instruction, the evening audit. At the end of each day, Marcus did something that most people would find uncomfortable. He reviewed his own mind, not his to-do list, not his accomplishments, his mind. He would ask himself, where did I give in to unnecessary anxiety today? Where did someone else's behavior take the wheel of my mood? Where did I react instead of respond? And then, what did I do well? Where did I hold the line? This is not self-punishment. This is the habit of someone who takes the quality of their own mind seriously. Most people move through life on autopilot, reacting, drifting, being shaped by whatever stimulus happens to hit them, and then they wonder why they feel out of control, why the same patterns keep repeating, why they keep ending up in the same emotional places despite wanting to be somewhere different. The evening audit is the practice of becoming the author of your mind rather than the character being written by it. You're not reviewing the day to punish yourself. You're reviewing it to learn, to adjust, to arrive at tomorrow with slightly more self-knowledge than you had today. And over time, brick by brick, that self-knowledge becomes something extraordinary. There is one teaching from Marcus Aurelius that stands above all the others, the one that, when you understand it not as a concept but as a lived reality, will rewrite how you see every hard thing in your life. It lives in 9 words. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Read it again, slowly. What stands in the way becomes the way. Not a consolation, not a reframe, a mechanism. Marcus Aurelius didn't just write this. He tested it in conditions that would have broken nearly anyone. When the plague hit Rome, he didn't wait for it to pass. He built field hospitals. He reorganized supply chains. He adapted military strategy to account for a depleted army. The plague, which was supposed to destroy him, forced him to develop infrastructure and medical systems that Rome had never had before. When betrayal came, from the man he trusted most, he didn't collapse into the bitterness that would have been completely understandable. He used it. He examined his own judgment. He developed a clearer understanding of human nature. He emerged wiser, not destroyed. The obstacle didn't slow him down. The obstacle built him. Now bring this to your life. Think about the hardest thing you've been through, not the inconveniences, the genuinely hard thing, the failure that you thought might be the end of something, the loss that rewrote your sense of who you were, the closed door that you were absolutely certain was the door you needed. And now, from where you're standing today, what did it give you? I don't mean this as toxic optimism. I mean it as a genuine question, because if you look clearly, almost always, the answer is, it gave you something that the smooth path could not have. resilience that you didn't have before, self-knowledge that only comes from being tested, a reorientation toward what actually matters, something that comfort rarely forces, the anxiety you're carrying right now, the struggle you're in the middle of. It is not evidence that you're failing. It is evidence that you're at the edge of who you currently are. And growth, the real kind, not the Instagram caption kind, only happens at that edge. Not in the comfortable middle. At the edge. Marcus Aurelius spent his entire reign at the edge. He never got a period of peace and ease. He never got to sit down and coast. And what that produced, what those decades of friction and difficulty forged, was a mind so sturdy, so examined, so deliberately built, that 2,000 years later, millions of people are still reading his private journal to understand how to live. The obstacle was never blocking his path. The obstacle was his path. It is yours too. Marcus Aurelius had a concept he returned to again and again, a concept he built his entire philosophy around. He called it the inner citadel. Picture a fortress, not built from stone or iron, nothing the physical world can touch. Built from self-knowledge, from deliberate practice, from the daily discipline of choosing your response over your reaction, your examined mind over your automatic one. Inside this fortress, at the very center, is something that cannot be taken from you. Marcus believed this absolutely. He saw it tested in himself and in others. You can lose your title. He watched emperors fall. You can lose your wealth. He saw fortunes dissolve. You can lose your health, your relationships, your reputation, your plans. He watched all of it happen to people around him, and he experienced losses of his own that would have leveled most people. But the one thing no external force can reach, the thing that remains completely and entirely yours, regardless of what the world does, is how you choose to think. That is your inner citadel. And here is what I want you to understand about building it. It is not built in a revelation. It is not built in a single moment of inspiration. It is built the way Marcus built his. Slowly, daily, through practice. It is built every time you catch a spiraling thought and ask, is this true? Is this mine to control? It is built every morning when you prepare your mind before the day begins. It is built every evening when you sit with your own behavior and ask, was that the person I want to be? It is built every time you strip away the inflated story from an event and see it clearly. It is built every time you choose, and it is always a choice, to respond instead of react. Every single one of those moments is a brick, and over time, without your fully noticing it, the fortress stands. And when it stands, when you've built it deliberately over months and years, the voice in your head changes character. It doesn't disappear entirely. The negativity bias doesn't go away. The threat detection software still runs, but it no longer runs you. You hear the anxious thought, and you don't obey it automatically. You notice the spiral beginning, and you have the tools to interrupt it. You feel the pull toward catastrophizing, and you recognize it for what it is. Your ancient brain trying to protect you from lions that no longer exist. And instead of being swept into it, you stand inside your citadel and choose. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by plague, war, loss, and betrayal, chose. Every single day, not because he was naturally at peace. Read the meditations carefully, and you'll see a man who wrestled constantly with his own mind, who struggled with frustration and grief and the weight of power, who failed and noted the failure and tried again. He was not a monk. He was not enlightened in some untouchable way. He was a person, a deeply human person, who decided that the quality of his mind was worth fighting for. Every day, until the very end. Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, not in a palace, not in comfort, at the front, in a military camp on the Danube frontier, surrounded by soldiers, at war until his last breath. He never got the quiet life. He never got the years of peaceful reflection he may have privately wished for. History does not record Marcus Aurelius dying in ease. History records him dying in service of the same values he had built his entire inner life around. Duty, integrity, the refusal to be less than what he knew a good person could be. He is not remembered for what he conquered. He is remembered for what he refused to surrender, not his territory, his mind. And here you are, 2,000 years later, carrying some version of the same struggle he wrote about in secret, never expecting anyone to read it. The voice, the doubt, the fear that you are not enough, the anxiety that the life you want is somehow not available to you. That voice is not new. It is not unique to you. It is not evidence of some special brokenness. It is the oldest human struggle there is. And Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, sat with that same voice in a military tent and chose, deliberately, stubbornly, daily, to not let it be the final word. You can do the same thing, not by silencing the voice with force, not by pretending it doesn't exist, by doing what Marcus did, looking at it clearly, questioning it honestly, reframing it accurately, using it as a signal that you've arrived at the edge of growth. Tonight, not tomorrow, tonight. Sit somewhere quiet. Open a journal or just a notes app on your phone. Ask yourself 3 questions. What thought has been controlling me lately? Is that thought actually true? Is it within my control? And then, whatever the answers, write them down honestly. This is how you begin building your inner citadel. 1 brick, 1 honest question, 1 choice to examine rather than obey. You may not feel different tonight. That's okay. Marcus didn't transform in a night either. The Meditations was written over years, but every architect of something extraordinary started by laying a single brick. Lay yours tonight. Marcus Aurelius faced a civilization on fire, plague, war, betrayal, loss, and left us a map. Not a map to a world without difficulty, a map to a mind that difficulty cannot break. That map is yours now. Use it.